Elias Powell walked up the cobblestone steps to the large wooden door on the cold, foggy streets of London in the fine year of our Lord 1910. His shaking hands fumbled clumsily around the brim of his bowler hat. His clothes were damp from the rain and the fog. His damp brown hair hung over his hazel eyes as he stood in the cold waiting for someone, anyone, to open the door. The large door swung open, and there stood a young man. The young man had slicked-back brown hair, brown eyes, very muscular, about 6 feet tall, and was very handsome by most standards. "Greetings, Dr. Powell. We've been expecting you," the young man said. "Mr. Talbot, I presume. My name is James Furright. Come, I will take you to Valkin." He followed James inside, and together they went up the stairs and found a man about the same age as James standing by an open window. As he turned around to leave, the young man spoke, but it wasn't soft like the other young man. It was a coarse voice that belonged to a worn man of many years. "Please, have a seat." "Mr. Talbot?" he asked, still standing next to the door. "I said, have a seat, Dr. Powell," the young man iterated. Elias hung his coat on a nearby coat rack and steadily walked over to the large blue chair sitting directly in front of the burning fireplace across from an identical chair, with a small coffee table sitting between them. The young man looked at him with his piercing blue eyes and took the seat across from him. "The reason I brought you here is in the hope that you will be my beginning step into constructing an organization in which we manufacture medicines. Before you answer, I have something to show you. You may remember your mother telling you horror stories of vampires, werewolves, the living dead, and other nonsensical creatures, am I correct?" Elias took a sip of his tea. "You are correct, sir. She told me as I grew older that they were just that. Stories. And what if I told you that these things were real?" I thought this was going to be a scientific discussion, not a gathering of 8-year-old boys. If any part of this conversation has to deal with monsters, I will take my leave. Just listen to me. "Never. This is ridiculous. I shall be leaving, Mr. Talbot," he said as he lifted himself out of his chair. Immediately, Valkin jumped out of his seat and set Elias back down with a great force. "Now, you will listen to me, or you'll be dead before you set foot on the streets of London," Valkin said as he removed his jacket and rolled down his left sleeve whilst holding down Elias with his right shoulder. "Watch," was all he had to say to get the doctor's attention. He stared in horror as Valkin's arm began to change before his very eyes. The fingernails tore open and a new, longer, blood-covered set replaced them. Grey hair grew rapidly from the hand and forearm. Valkin began to chuckle as Elias screamed in horror. Muscles began to rapidly enlarge in the forearm, and the hair began to spread to the rest of the arm. Valkin's eyes closed and opened to show nothing but pure white sclera. His ears began to change. He let out a loud howl, baring his canine-like teeth. "I believe you! I believe you!" Elias cried as he closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he found Valkin rolling down the sleeve of his left arm and going over to sit down in his chair. Valkin took another puff from his pipe as he looked at the pale Elias. "There is a whole world out there you have yet to discover. The demons, the vampires, the werewolves, the monsters in your closet were all alive and well in this world you don't understand. Though you shall understand this new world, but only if you are willing to learn." He pulled himself out of his chair with his pipe in his mouth, grabbed his coat from the coat rack, and opened the door. "You won't escape alive," Valkin called as Elias slammed the door between them. He walked down the stairs and found James waiting at the bottom with his right hand behind his back. "How was the meeting, Dr. Powell?" James asked, slowly walking up the stairs. "Terrible. Mr. Talbot threatened to murder me," he responded as he rushed down the stairs. "Relax, Mr. Talbot does not try to murder anybody," James said, walking up the stairs step by step. "Well, he tried to murder me," he said, running right into James, feeling a sharp pain in his gut. "As I said, Mr. Talbot does not want to kill anybody. That is my job," James said, as he began to pull his arm back. Elias looked down to find a set of claws dug into his stomach. He let out one final scream. bringing the end of Elias Powell. If you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more, be sure to pick up a copy of the full novel at decadesapartfilms.com.